So good evening and welcome everyone to the MHCH Housing Justice Educational Forum, Rent Control in Pasadena, Know Your Rights and How to Assert Them. We have this evening with us B. Rooney and Michelle White, who helped write our rent control ordinance in Pasadena, Measure H, which came into effect on December 22nd. And they will talk about it and take questions. Before we get to them, I'm going to do a little bit of an inspirational reflection, and then we'll hear from Pam Walker about her experience in successfully claiming her rent rollback. And then B will talk and we'll take questions and answers, and then Michelle will talk and we'll take question and answer. And then we'll have our team reports so you can hear about the other work of MHCH, because we do a lot of work on trying to get affordable housing built. So, and then we'll have an ED report from Jill and announcements. So one of the things we want to get clear on this evening is how to claim the rent rollback that many people are due under Measure H. And I've been going around to churches on Sundays and handing out flyers and speaking to churches, handing out the flyer that Pasadena Tenants Union put together, and speaking to people, encouraging them to claim their rent rollback and tenant rights under Measure H. And in fact, today I was going around with a woman from one of the churches that I went to, in fact, the one I was at on Sunday, La Fuente. Her name is Betsy. I don't know, she may be here tonight. She said she was going to be late. But we went door to door in her apartment complex today, and where she was able to talk to people, give them the flyer, and she got to know her neighbors and created solidarity. Now, when I'm in front of a church, if it's a church that uses the Bible as a Christian church, not all of our congregations are Christian congregations, but if I'm in front of one that does, what I like to say is, did you know that ancient Israel was having a severe housing crisis in the 8th century BC? And we know this because Isaiah was talking about it. Isaiah 5:8 says, "Woe to you who join house to house and field to field until there is room for no one but you, and you are left to live alone in the land." He's talking about wealthy people buying up land and houses and moving out the common people and the poor. So when that happens today, what do we call that? So now I'm asking you here, somebody tell me, what do we call that when that happens today? When wealthy people buy land and buy up everything and common people have to move away?
Gentrification.
Gentrification, yes.
Yeah.
I've never, I've done this a number of times in the churches, that people always immediately, they know what it is, it's gentrification. So there we have gentrification in 8th century BC ancient Israel. Gentrification described in the Bible. But we are suffering gentrification today, and it's hit hardest on working class, hardest on the Black and brown communities. In Pasadena, we have seen the African-American community decline by over 50% in the last 30 years. So severe gentrification. How do we stop it? One way is to build affordable housing, and that's a lot of the work of MHCH. We're doing a lot of different things to get affordable housing built, but doing that, getting affordable housing built takes a long time. From the time we start our campaigns, the time it gets built, it can easily be 5-10 years. So we need other tools in our toolbox. And one of those is rent control. Rent control is one way we can stop gentrification. It's one way that we can show love to our brothers and sisters who are vulnerable to displacement. It's one way we can be in solidarity with each other. So, so now I want to invite Pam Walker to share her story. She is from Lincoln Avenue Baptist Church, one of the churches I went to, and she's going to share her story about successfully claiming her rent rollback. So Pam, you want to unmute and tell us how you did it?
Okay. Hello, everyone. Well, my other friend right there, Pam Wilson, we both work at the food bank at our church, and she was talking about Measure 8. And then I said, when does it start? And she said, on January the 1st, Pam? And then she said, I have some information about it. I'm gonna send it to you. And I said, okay, I'm gonna send it to my property manager. Mine is they pay for the whole, we pay them our rent. And our month to month. I've been living in my apartment 30 years. I was in my apartment when it started off 600. Now it was 1,700. And for 2 bedroom, 2 baths, 12 apartment buildings, security in just regular part of town, Villa and Orange Grove. So anyway, Pam sent me the information about the rent going back in what, 2000, in August, Pam?
May of 2021.
In May. It went back
May.
in May of.
So I said, give it to me. I'm gonna text my property manager and tell him that our rent should be going back. And I sent it to her, and for 2 weeks, I didn't hear anything. Then all of a sudden, I got a letter saying that starting on January 1st, we're gonna pull your rent back to $200. They took off my rent. So now I pay $200 less than what I was paying. And so I didn't say nothing for a long time. So yesterday I was downstairs washing clothes. So I asked my one of renters that I know, I said, did your rent go down 200? She said hers went down higher than that, like 300, because I've been here so long, they probably didn't raise my rent as high as they raised everybody else. And she said, I wonder who was doing that. I said, did it just happen? She said, yeah, we start paying less on March the 1st. And they're going to send us a check. I get some money back, And so I said, so everybody in the apartment, this happened to. And she said, yes. I said, oh, well, because she's the nosy one. She's the one who called everybody, but they couldn't figure out who was the person. And then I said, yeah, I know somebody that knows somebody. And I said, and I sent the letter and she said, I wouldn't believe that you would send it. I said, all they could tell you was yes or no. I said, so I sent it, and and they did it. They rolled back the rent.
Awesome.
Amen. Thank you, Pam. Thanks for sharing that. That's encouraging. It is happening. People are getting their rent rollbacks. Now, other people are meeting a lot of resistance. But some people are getting their rent rollback. So, Jill, can you introduce B for her?
I'll do my best. So
Okay.
I just know that this gal right here, Bridget Rooney, is amazing, brilliant. And she is our neighbor around the corner on Penn. And it's just a joy to know that we have this headquarters for rent control right in our neighborhood. She has spent, I don't know how many hours, B. You've just really given your heart and soul for the last couple years. And I don't think it's anything you ever dreamed you would do. And here you are, you did it, and you were successful, and you didn't do it alone. There are over 500 people with you, and with Michelle leading, along with Ryan and others that were just huge leaders in this movement. So I have deep respect and appreciation for you. And I'm sure you could say other things about your credentials, but that's what I want to say about you.
Great. Thank you so much, Jill. Am I good to get started?
Yes.
Let's
Okay.
take it away, B.
And it
Speak up,
seems like
speak
people
up.
can hear me, so that's great. Let me start by sharing my screen real quick. Share the right one here. So can everyone see my screen?
Yeah, you might have to speak up a little bit. You're a little bit soft.
Okay.
Yeah.
Let me make a quick edit to my my Zoom. Oh God, where'd it go? Here it is. Just 1 second. Okay. Is this any better?
Yes.
Okay, great. All right. So I'm gonna, I think, keep this out of presentation view because it's a little easier to jump through the slides. But Yeah, so I'm Brigitta Rooney, also go by B. I've been in Pasadena for 7 years now. I came as for grad school, but got involved in tenant organizing, and that's kind of where I'm at right now. So I'm a volunteer organizer with the Pasadena Tenants Union. I've been dropping some links in the chat, so please open up the chat and check those out. While we were waiting to get ready, a lot of people were hopping on and kind of just introducing themselves and sharing situations that they're in and questions that they have. I'm going to try my best to hopefully answer and clear up a lot of those. However, it's complicated, and it might not happen tonight. So please get on the Pasadena Tenants Union email list. We're going to have more in-depth workshops on Measure H with more time to actually talk directly about what exactly you're facing yourself. But for tonight, I'm just, trying to really talk about the rent rollback because I think that's where a lot of people are at right now. But I do want to say that Measure H is a very comprehensive tenant protection law. It goes as far as we could possibly take it. So it is a rent rollback. It is a rent increase cap. It is also a lot of eviction protections and some other little protections thrown in there. So if you're ever wondering, like, this doesn't seem fair, this doesn't seem right, you might be correct. It might be illegal. Take a look at the law or seek some more help. But so with that, I will get started. Okay, Measure H, that's what everyone's calling it. It is officially the Article 18 of the Pasadena Charter. It's in law. So the very first thing is Measure H is the law. We voted on it. It was ratified in December and actually started in December in effect. It is in effect, and it is such until the court specifically says otherwise. It does not matter if your landlord is telling you, oh, it's in the court, so we're going to wait. That's wrong. That's illegal. It's unlawful. That is not right. They're in the wrong. Also, we're hearing that a lot of city representatives are also contributing to the misinformation that it is not in effect. All of that's false. H is the law, and it is the law exactly as it is written until the court says otherwise. Okay. Got that out of the way. It's the law. Your landlord is lying to you. They're just trying to make money, blah, blah, blah. All right. Okay, so a broad overview of the whole measure. It has 5 major provisions. One is that rent control, and that means essentially that your rent can still increase year after year, but now it's only allowed to increase once per year and only up to a maximum of 75% of inflation. So over time, cost of everything's going up. Relatively, your rent should be becoming cheaper over time. The second major portion is eviction protections. We now have very strong, very clear reasons that are allowed for eviction and reasons that are not allowed and that are unlawful. A major one that I just want to put out there right now is that renovation is no longer a legal reason to evict you. You have to get some other things in return. We'll talk about that a bit. Another portion is relocation assistance. So if the landlord wants to evict you for a no-fault reason, meaning you've been a good tenant, you've been paying your rent, you don't damage the property, blah, 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 but they just really want you out for a few reasons, then they have to provide you something, some additional relocation assistance, cash, that sort of thing. The other portions of the measure are a rental registry. So we want to actually know, where are the units in Pasadena? Who owns them? How much have they previously been charging? Is it actually permitted? Is it a legal habitable unit? That'll be really helpful for everybody, but also to analyze what's going on in the city and hopefully solve some problems. And then the last portion is the rental board, which will help implement this law. And a lot of things landlords are saying right now, or other people are saying, well, oh yeah, sure, it's a law, but it's in the court and the rental board isn't set up. And so there's no way to, implement the law. That's false. Like any other law, the court exists. If, we don't have an anti-theft board that we have to wait for to go to the courts and say this person stole from me, like the court exists. It operates as usual. You can take your landlord there, or they can take you there, regardless of the rental board not existing. So there are ways to implement this law before the rental board exists. Okay, so to start with, we have to think about, is your residential unit covered by the rent control portion and the eviction protections portion? It is not every single unit in Pasadena. It is most. But so for the major thing, the eviction protections apply to almost all units. Those main exceptions are things like dormitories, or if you are in a medical facility or rehab or part of a nonprofit housing group. Those are the exceptions. Most other residential units that you live in you get the eviction protections. Don't leave before checking your rights. For the rent control portion, it's a little more confusing. And this is because of state law that puts really annoying restrictions on it. So this is as best as it could be for the time being. So if you are in a unit that was built before February 1st, 1995, and that unit is not a condo or like the only unit on a lot, so I'll show some examples, and it's not part of like an inclusionary housing program or Section 8 or other state or federal programs like that, your unit is very likely covered. So I'll say this in a different way. If you live in a condo where, one owner owns one unit in this huge building of 200 units, you're not covered by the rent control. You are still covered by eviction protections. If you live in a single family home and there's no other unit on the property, you're not covered by rent control. If you live in a unit that was built after February 1st, 1995, anything really new, your unit is not covered by rent control specifically. The eviction protections apply to almost all of those units. So you can look at this a little graphically here. Also, I forgot to mention, I've dropped this file in the chat. You're welcome to download that and keep it. And we'll be putting this information online to be accessible in the future. So here's another example. We're taking a walk down a street in Pasadena. You see all sorts of different housing types. You might come across a duplex. That's more than one residential unit on the same property. If it's built before February 1st, 1995, it's covered. You live in a condo with many other condos in the building, you're not covered. If it's just an apartment, one owner, one management company for the whole thing, you're covered. So those just some examples. You do have to remember, it still has to be built before February 1st, 1995. And it can't be part of inclusionary housing, Section 8, etc. Okay, so some other housing types. You might see a little bungalow courtyard or a little villa courtyard, and a bunch of people, different people live there. Each unit is separate. They don't share any walls. As long as those units are built, your unit, not even all of them, your unit is built before 1995, and all of those units are on the same property, the same piece of land, owned by the same person, you're covered by rent control. Similarly, if you just got a strip of units that are sharing walls, you're covered by rent control. So one of the little trickier scenarios that people don't think of as much. All right, we've got two different types of property here. These red lines, these are the lot lines, so the land property. There's a single family home on each property, but you see the one on the right also has this secondary living unit or an additional dwelling unit or back house, pool house, converted garage, whatever it is. If your unit was built before February 1st, 1995, you're covered. It doesn't matter if this is a single family home in the front or not. There are multiple residential units on the same piece of land, the same property, the same owner. You would be covered by the rent control. I live in a place like this on the left, just a single family house with a yard. There are no other units. There's no garage that was converted or little tack onto the house. So my unit is not covered by the rent control. However, it is still covered by the eviction protections. So especially when it comes to evictions, do not leave your home without double checking your rights, and do not ask the landlord about your rights. They will not tell you things. They will lie to you. Okay. So going forward, we have to keep in mind, is the unit covered under each provision? It's hard to keep track. There are tools online. I'll show a quick example of that for you in a bit. But let's move into the rent rollback. So yes, the law's in court, but that doesn't matter. You still get your rent rollback. You are still entitled by law to receive your rent rollback. And so what is that? So that means if your rent has been raised in your apartment since May 17th, 2021, you get to revert the rent that you pay to what you were paying May 17th, 2021. Or if you've moved into a new place since then, because it's been 2 years, basically if your rent has been raised in the recent amount of time, you get to roll back and start paying the lower rent before it was raised. This is a very common thing in laws, especially tenant laws, or rent rollback. It's not weird, it's normal. And you deserve that lower rent. So, the other thing is, Measure H does allow for rent increases. However, they cannot roll back the rent and automatically add in the allowed rent increase. They still have to properly serve you your 30-day notice. So when you're coming up on your next rent payment, you pay the rollback rate. Then they can immediately serve you a 30-day notice, but that doesn't take effect until 30 days. So when you're trying to figure out your rent rollback, don't automatically add in what they'd be allowed to increase it. So you're just going straight back to the flat rate you paid May 17th, 2021, or the earliest date that you've moved in at your current place. And this law has been in effect since December 22nd. So any rent you have paid since then, if you're covered under the rent control, should have been your rolled back rate, unless they also properly served you the increase. It's probably not happened, and from what I've heard from people. So if you have overpaid, you kept paying the rent that it was early December, whatever, you are allowed to, by law, recover that money that you've overpaid. So and the tenants union in general is encouraging people to deduct any amount you've overpaid from your next payment. All right, so how do you start this process? Number one, double check that your unit is actually covered. Do not change what you're paying your landlord until you are pretty positive that you're covered, because that can really come back to bite you. So, built before February 1st, 1995, you live in a multifamily home or a home where there are other units on the property somewhere. So you can start by writing a letter to your landlord, asserting your new rights and stating the new rate that you will be paying them. Writing a letter is not required by law, but it's a courtesy, and it can help kind of, keep things smooth and keep you safe. Tell them my rent was this on May 17th, 2021. That's what I'll be paying as per Measure H, and pay it. Again, there's a toolkit that I'll show you how to use in a second to help you along with that. But on the right box here, a lot of people pay via an online portal set up by the management company. And usually with those, you can't go in and change the number that is automatically paid. So if that is the case, you got to talk to your landlord. You have to assert your rights. You have to go to them. And by go to them, I mean write an email, write a text. Don't do this over phone. Do not do this over voice. You want everything, every correspondence between you and your landlord to be written and documented somewhere. So write them a letter. It's helpful to, CC some people or whatever. Keep it in your documents, save it to your computer, print it out, whatever. And assert your rights. Tell them that this is the law. This unit is covered by rent control. I am entitled to the rent rollback. It does not matter if you disagree. It is also California state law that landlords must accept a form of payment other than cash or electronic transfer. a lot of landlords we're hearing are trying to manipulate people by only providing that online portal where they can't change the number of how much they're paying. And if the portal closes, they have no way to pay. That's really wrong, illegal, messed up. So if they have to accept something other than cash or electronic transfer, like a personal check or a cashier's check, presumably they also have to provide you with an address or location to deliver it. We all know that there are laws and that the landlords don't necessarily follow them. So let's talk about a little bit of what you can do if they're denying your rent rollback. So some tips. I encourage people to use a cashier's check, which you can go to the bank to get, and basically it is sort of cash. You know, it's been verified by the bank that this money exists, and basically you just hand it off. That leaves a paper trail that you have the money and you've tried sending it. You can also send it via certified mail, again, a paper trail. The other thing that we do frequently is we film the event. Take my check, I've written it out, it's signed, you can see the number, the date, film everything, put it in the envelope, write it, go put it in the mailbox, or you're putting it on the box on your manager's door, film the whole thing. So a little more tips with filming. It feels excessive, but we want to cover all your bases. You want to have as much documentation and evidence as possible. So if you want to go the filming route, it's helpful to have someone else do it. Take a moment at the beginning to say your name, what unit you're in, what you're doing, date, time. Have the person filming also identify themselves so you can be a witness, kind of like, oh, well, that person was there too. Film a continuous shot so that it doesn't look edited, like just turn on the recording and do the whole thing. Don't cut anything out, don't turn off and on. Show your face. If possible, maybe you drive by a gas station that shows the date and time above or something, like, film that, but that's kind of hard. Basically, this is really just get as much evidence as possible that you have, in full faith, tried to pay the rent and tried to do it properly. We also are asking that tenants forward on correspondence that they have with their landlord, where the landlord has denied their right, asking to forward that to the PTU email. We're trying to create, and you can ask for, your personal information to be redacted or do that yourself, but we're trying to create basically records to get a sense of how many people is this happening to, what landlords are doing, what management companies are being the biggest problem, that sort of thing. It may or may not be helpful in the lawsuit, I don't know, but we need this information. It's like, everyone's like, oh, well, show me the data. It's like, okay. And then this last thing in this red box down here, them refusing to accept or acknowledging receipt of a lawful rent that you've paid pursuant to Measure H, that is considered harassment under Measure H. So them ignoring you, denying you, that they're already breaking the law. And that can serve as a defense if you get an unlawful detainer, end up in court for eviction. That can serve as a defense. And it can also serve as a basis for affirmative action. So if you wanted to sue the landlord, you can use that as evidence and reasons in your case. And you may be entitled to get damages, a payback, or injunctive relief. Okay, that is the main stuff about the rent rollback. I have a lot of other material. I'm trying to think of maybe what's the best thing to do right now. Time check? What are we at? How are we doing? I don't know if anyone's keeping track.
I think we're doing pretty good. I was trying to monitor some of the questions in the chat.
Okay, yes, I can't see that at all. So
we can't. Okay, let me.
Not while I'm sharing. Yeah.
Let me see. Okay, I'm having a hard time scrolling it down. Okay, so one of the questions is, how do we get the landlord to honor the law now instead of waiting for the court decision? So I guess that's kind of what you were talking about. Is there anything you want to add to that?
So, try all the things I've stated here. But when it comes down to it, it is on us as tenants to fight for our own rights and for the rights of our neighbors. The landlord is there for profit. They do not care about our interests. And you got to exercise your right. It is, even though by law that they're supposed to inform you of certain things and supposed to do things, they're just not going to. So we got to do it. In addition to anything that I've said on the slide so far, I really, really encourage you, please join the Pasadena Tenants Union, at least the email list, come to meetings. And we are really interested in trying to help tenants across the city band together with their neighbors. It is really powerful if you and your whole floor or your whole building or whatever sends the same letter to the landlord as a group that says, everyone in these units, we are paying our rolled back rate as we are entitled to by law. And if you don't accept it, you are liable for damages and even potentially a misdemeanor charge. It's really powerful when we act in concert, especially if you're under the same owner. It's much harder for them to deal with, and they will very specifically try to deal with people individually and come up with different deals and be like, okay, fine, you can pay me this, but they don't like the other people in a different tenant, they're going to give them a different deal. So I really, really encourage you to work together with your neighbors. You got to talk to them.
If they don't respond, invite the press. I've done this before very successfully, and the press are often looking for something to cover, and they love this sort of thing. It's very dramatic, but you get everyone to hold signs against the landlord or in front of the management company. You do a whole thing. They will change very quickly.
Yes, the press really works. If you don't know where to start, reach out to the Pasadena Tenants Union. We would really love to be able to start making apartment associations of specific tenants in their building to work together. We have,
There's
some
a few questions here that people have in the chat. Like one said they switched it to month as opposed to a contract, and so and their rent was not increased, and they were wondering if that was normal.
Yeah, so I think this is a kind of normal for California that leases, if you don't sign a new year-long or longer-term lease, it automatically goes into month-to-month. The only thing I want to point out specifically is, okay, if this isn't written out very well on the slide, but if you're currently on a year-long lease and the landlord offers you a new lease with the same terms and same duration as your previous lease, and you do not sign it, they are allowed to evict you. It's kind of a nuanced situation. That's not in most, but if you're on a year-long lease and they want you to sign a new lease that's basically the same, that's just another year, you have to sign it if you want to stay there. It won't automatically, or they could evict you if you don't sign it instead of allowing you to go month to month. I see someone asked about subtracting the overpaid rent. Yes, people have successfully just deducted what they overpaid, and it is always helpful to tell the landlord that you're going to do that. It's not required though, but it makes it easier. Yeah.
There's another question about utilities charges, and it was combined, their utilities with the rent.
Yes.
Can you speak?
Sorry, looking for, okay.
What's the question?
So it says, does anyone have any insight on utilities charges? They are not subject under Measure H, correct? That's the question.
So in Measure H, one of the first sections is just a big glossary that defines the legal terms. And so on this slide on the right here, you see a little bit of it. When Measure H says rent, it means everything that they charge you for on a regular basis. It means your rent payment. It also adds in if you have a specific parking charge, if you have a pet rent, if you have a renting furniture, if you have utility charges, subletting things, whatever. All of that is considered rent. So they can't, say they raise the rent portion, a specific amount that's legal, and then they're like, okay, but I'm also going to raise your utility charge or your parking charge by $200. The total amount that they're increasing your charges is considered rent, and they have to abide by that, even if it's called utilities or called a parking charge or something like that.
There's another question here that has to do with, it says that their landlord is raising their rent by 6% for the last 2 months. And so I think it needs to be just 75% of the amount. Is that right? Yeah, consumer price index.
Yes. So on if my screen is still being shared, right? Okay. Yeah. So this slide here is the first allowed rent increase. So the 6%, they're probably thinking that along this line. And yeah, so the first rent increase that is allowed because of timing is going to be a little bit different than in the future. So this table spells out, depending on when you moved in and if you're covered by the rent control, how much they can raise your rent the first year. So if you've moved in before May 17th, 2021, so 2 years ago, if you moved in before that, the allowed rent increase is up to 6%. If you moved in after May 17th, 2021, but before May 17th, 2022, you would use this table down here to see the percent that they're allowed to increase. And this percent is, like 5.5% of my rent and my utilities and my parking charge, everything that you pay the landlord month after month. That's the percentage that you take. That's how much they'd be allowed to increase.
Is that clear for the person that asked that? There's another question. Yeah, Catherine.
Can I say that a bunch of other forums on Measure H, and so nobody expects people to get this the first time around. So please come back to another forum if you don't understand.
Yeah, I also want to point out, so I put this slide document in the chat. I will do it again. There's a lot more here that we're not mentioning right now. Please, it would probably be helpful to read it carefully. I additionally want to point out on many of the slides, there's this little scroll somewhere on the slide, and it has this funky little S and some number. This is a reference to the portion of the actual law, the code, so where you can go read that portion and see how that came to be. So if you're writing a letter to your landlord, you can say, according to section 1808, I deserve this or whatever. Additionally, some things that might encourage them to accept your new rent is that, let me see here. According to, you'll want to check out 1817, section 1817. This is remedies, civil remedies. So whenever the landlord wrongs you, what can you do? What are you entitled to? You are allowed to recover overpayments. You are also allowed to sue for damages, and you could get up to triple, 3 times the amount that you're owed, kind of, from the landlord. That's possible if they're acting maliciously and willfully, basically being like, oh yeah, I know the law, but whatever, I'm going to do what I want. If they don't comply, that's also an affirmative defense in court. So it might be helpful to state some of these things in your correspondence, like, if they're like, oh, well, I'm going to wait till the court sort out, like, I understand that. However, the city, the court, even the people suing have all acknowledged that the law is in effect despite the lawsuit. We are entitled to the rent rollback, blah, blah, blah. And if you don't give me my rent rollback, I can recover it at some point, or I can take you to court. Like, you might be liable for way more than what you owe me right now. Additionally, it's not on the slide, but in 1817, they can be charged with a misdemeanor. So a criminal charge. That is a new thing. They don't want that. It is in their best interest to obey this law now, before the Pasadena Tenants Union can talk to every single tenant and encourage them to fight back and get triple damages. So, and if, you know,
I want to be sensitive to the time for
Yeah.
Michelle, and I know Bert's checking that as well, but I do have an interesting question here that someone put in regarding that they had 2 parking places, and then the landlord took one of those away, charged an increase of 10% in November 2022, took away 1 parking place, and then they said now that if they want a second parking place, they have to pay an extra $150 per month.
yeah, so with the parking place thing, it to really make it needs to be basically in the lease. If it's a verbal agreement, like your landlord just told you can use this parking spot, but it's not spelled out in the lease, it's likely pretty hard to get anything out of that. The 10% increase sounds potentially illegal. Depends on if their unit is covered by the rent control. So again, before February 1st, 1995, in a unit that has other people's residential units on the property somewhere. Oh, I do want to say for everyone to hear this, especially I know there's some folks not from Pasadena, so Measure H is Pasadena City. It also does not include East Pasadena, which is under LA County unincorporated. Also, even if you're not covered by the rent control in Measure H, you may be covered by the state level AB 1482 laws, or the LA County COVID restrictions. So if you might, keep this in mind, write this down, just a quick note, AB 1482. Right now, the maximum increase on state level for covered units is 10%. So if you see anything over 10%, definitely check if your unit, what type of unit you're in. It's very likely that's an illegal rent increase. They cannot cut off your utilities. I just saw that somewhere. That is like an illegal way to do something to somebody.
Yeah, and clarification, so by East Pasadena, B means the part of
Huntington.
far East Pasadena that's not actually in the city limits. There's actually a lot of what we call East Pasadena that is in the city limits that is covered. And the county has its own rent control ordinance that you can look
Yes.
up on the county website.
Oh, yeah, I meant to say that too, the LA County Rent Stabilization Ordinance. And so the last thing I want to show real quick, and I also put this link in the chat, if you go to the PasadenaForRentControl.org or the PasadenaTenantsUnion.org websites, you'll see a link to the Measure H Tenant Toolkit. So in here, there's a quick summary of the major points of the law, other resources about like how can I find out when my unit was built, how to calculate the first rent increase, your contacts at City Hall, and then a set of sample letters. So for example, here's a letter template that you can fill out and change appropriately for your scenario. And basically it's kind of written out as is. It says, look, the city has recognized that this is in law, so you got to give me my rent rollback kind of thing. So along with that template, there's also one for a no-fault eviction or an invalid rent increase, some samples here that you can use as a template. If you have questions or need more help, please do email or get in touch with the Pasadena Tenants Union. There are like more than 60,000 tenants in the city. We are super powerful together. So don't act alone. You've got a lot of friends and a lot of neighbors that want to help you out and want to fight together for a dignified life, and we can achieve that.
Thank you so much, B.
Why don't you tell people when PTU meets?
Yes. So PTU meets the second and fourth Thursdays of each month at 7 p.m. So we have another meeting this Thursday at 7. It's going to be online, but next month we'll be back in the Flint Ridge Center. in Pasadena, and that information will be online again. And well, everyone's listening. Oops, to me. No, I lost my slide. Okay, here we go. Someone just asked for the link to the PowerPoint, and rather than sharing the link, I just put the file, a PDF of the PowerPoint, into the chat, so you can download it right there. And we'll be hopefully adding that soon to the tenant toolkit page so people can easily find that information.
Also, someone just asked, how can I find out when my unit was built? And you can see it right there on the slide, right, that she's showing right now.
Yeah,
There's a link that you can use to find that out.
Yeah. So basically all it is describes how to get to the LA County Assessor's Portal, which has information about properties and things like that. If it seems tricky and you don't see what seems to be the answer, email PTU and we can try to help. Or you can try what else is on this document and contacting code compliance at the city level, because they should have documents of when the unit was first allowed to be occupied for residential purposes.
And I think somebody kept asking how far when the rent rollback starts, and it starts in January. So if you overpaid in January or February, then you're actually due for a refund of that portion.
Yeah.
So I think somebody kept asking that. And B, I don't know if maybe while Michelle is speaking, if you could look through the chat. I had a hard time keeping up with all the questions.
Yeah.
If you can go through and see if there are questions that didn't get answered. And also, yeah, just thank you so much, B, for all the work you're doing. It's incredible. I really, I'm in awe of you and all the people at PTU, you and Michelle and Ryan and all the rest. And so now we'll have Anthony is going to introduce his friend who is a friend at the same meeting, Michelle. That's an inside Quaker joke.
Yes.
Anthony, go ahead and introduce Michelle.
Okay, well, you've already stolen my thunder. I was going to say that Michelle is a friend in every sense. I've known her for over 20 years. She's one of the most persistent, passionate, and prophetic activists in our city. She's been on the front line of racial and social justice movements most of her life. So it's just such a joy to be able to introduce her and say, she has worked on this for over 20 years. She and Bert and Jill launched a rent control campaign 20 years ago, and now it is successful. It's reality. And I just want to say how grateful I am to Michelle for her persistence. Thank you. And her brilliance. You'll hear from her. She's a lawyer.
Oh, boy. Thanks, Anthony. You're something. I really appreciate that. I am somebody who has done fair housing for most of my life, and I see all of this as fair housing issues because they have such impacts on people of color, especially with so many having to leave the city because of gentrification and whatnot that Bert had talked about. But 4 years ago, we tried in a very systematic way to get rent control. We didn't get enough signatures, but with the help of B and other people who are just so talented and kinds of, the online work, the statistics, the ability to manipulate the voting system and the files in such a way that we were able to, as a group, work. And as a result, we have Measure H. Now, you've heard all that B said about Measure H, but I want you to know that there's more coming. And part of that is that of the ability to have regulations and a budget and hire staff. But what happened was right after it became confirmed officially that we were Measure H was to go into effect, Apartment Association filed suit. And it has been using the filing of that suit and what they were asking for as a mechanism for trying to confuse the situation and that are just highly unreasonable. What we have now is a situation where they filed suit, and part of that suit requests that there be a temporary restraining order, which is basically would put a stop to everything unless the court said, no. And in order to get a temporary restraining order, you have to show that that there's going to be great harm as a result of not granting such a restraining order, and that the law is pretty clear that you're entitled to it. Well, the judge decided that the law was in fact going in the other direction, and that the California Apartment Association really didn't make a very good showing. But nonetheless, while it would allow everything else to go into effect, the court decided that it would hold off on actually appointing the people who would serve on the rent board. So what we have now is a situation where that's held in abeyance, but everything else is supposed to go. So I just want to emphasize that what B was saying about not taking this kind of confusion as a bottom line answer, please be in touch with PTU, be in touch with, if you can afford a lawyer, that would be great, because it is pretty clear that from the language of the measure that it goes into effect right now. So after the court decided that it was not going to grant what's called a temporary restraining order, or a TRO, if you've ever heard of that. But it decided also that it would have another hearing as of the 28th of March. And hopefully it will be decided once and for all that this goes into effect. The appointments for people who are going to be on the board will go into effect, and that'll be the end of it. The other thing that happened was that the proponents of the measure, as well as the corporation that we've been operating under, Affordable Pasadena, would be allowed to be part of the suit, because they decided that we're really the people who have a stake in this, or more of a stake in this than the city, although the city made pretty good arguments at the last hearing. So we've got that in place. We're waiting for the appointment of the rent board, because with the appointment of the rent board, we will then be able within 6 months to have the regulations put in place. We will hire staff. We will do a lot of things that are will cause this measure to really become part and parcel of the body of law within the city. So that is where we are right now. And what is happening with the city is Mark Chomsky, who is the clerk of the city and really a friend of anybody who wants to do things the right way, helped us get this started, and he's sent out applications anybody who's interested in being on the board, we're really inviting you to take a look at what's required, which is having at least 25 signatures. As B pointed out, there are 7 spaces that are being reserved for tenants, 1 from each one of the districts, and 4 at large. They can be homeowners or realtors or who knows what. They don't have to have a job. And the people who are providing the 25 signatures, they don't have to be registered voters. They just have to be residents of the city or residents of the particular district in which you are trying to be appointed, or from which you're trying to be appointed. So with that, we're at the point where we need to figure out what's next in terms of what's going to happen with this board. We really do need to have a consultant who will help us write the regulations. Another consultant would help us with the setting up of the board. And for me, I think we need a group or an individual who is going to provide legal services to those tenants who are having such problems with their landlords, because we don't have a landlord tenant attorney or advocacy group, legal advocacy group in the city taking care of our tenants. So I think that that's something that the board, the rent board, should include it in its budget. So that is something, though, I can't decide, although I would like to be on the board for at least 2 years. It will be the board itself that decides things like that. But it will be one of the things that I would recommend to the board, whether or not, or a number of other things that could be recommended to the board of the board recognizing what the problems are, all of the things that we're talking about now and previously. Those things need to be presented to the board as issues included in the regulations in such a way so that it's hands-on and you can very quickly have those kinds of questions answered within the regulations or by staff. So with that in mind, the rent board would go into effect. 6 months later, these regulations are supposed to be drafted and ready. And another thing that I think ought to be included in this is the role between or among the various agencies within the city. The code enforcement department, or a unit rather, it's part of planning. Although they have responsibilities, they rarely, if ever, show up in landlord-tenant court to assist tenants who are having habitability issues. Under California law, if you have a habitability claim and it is legitimate, a landlord, if it's bad enough, a landlord may not collect rent. So you may be able to get your rent waived if your landlord is not complying with the law. But that you really need an attorney to assist you with. One of the other things that would come into play is when you're talking about having paid your rent or trying to communicate with your landlord. Although B is right, if you go ahead and have proof of the mailing of something because you had a certified mail. Another way of arguing this is that under common law in California, if you put a letter in the mail, put a stamp on it, it is assumed to have been sent and delivered. So the landlord, it then shifts to the landlord to prove that that didn't happen. Things with the assistance of an attorney, you can argue in court. More often than not, you will get into a situation in landlord-tenant with a landlord-tenant commissioner. They're not very sympathetic to tenants, so you wind up going to Superior Court. You definitely need an attorney there. So you can either necessary to document your case and hopefully get on the landlord tenant level quickly, or you can go into Superior Court. But if you can go into landlord tenant court, you would be one of the few people who have access to an attorney there. More often than not, 90% of the landlords who are in court are represented by attorneys. About 10% of tenants are represented by attorneys. And it has been argued before City Council that our tenants need representation. And that's why I would suggest that part of what we do going forward with the rent board is to include some way to make sure that tenants get access to attorneys. So one of there is a packet that's out there and you can get it from the city clerk. If you want to be one of the tenants or alternates or at-large representatives on the rent board, and the application itself is not very complicated. You do have to get at least 25 petition signatures, and that way you can then be considered by City Council. Hopefully that would be done by April and we would have everything in place by then. There was somebody who asked what they could do in terms of donating money that's going on with respect to the litigation. Is that we're going to have about $18,000 to $20,000 in costs that will have to be developed at some point. That's one thing. Another thing that can be done is PTU is always in need of some cash. And I know that making community housing and community happen always members and donations. I'm trying to see what else is listed here. One of the other things that I would suggest is that once we come up with a slate of tenants and tenant-friendly individuals who will serve on the rent board, or we're suggesting ought to serve on the rent board, because the final determination is made by by City Council. Then we need to start advocating before City Council and meeting with our city representatives to make sure that the right people get appointed. The people who sued to stop the implementation of Measure H are applying to be one of the people, three of the people rather, who are interested in joining the board of the rent board. And that would just make things very complicated, and we should not include them because it's just not something that's going to facilitate our work. And then the last thing I would suggest is that we actually need to have the rent board itself held accountable. It's a public meeting, and whoever is interested in attending those, they should attend whenever that board meets. There'll be a comment period, and to the extent that people need to bring issues before the rent board, they should become actively involved. So I did not look at the chat to see what questions were there. So if somebody can, if there are questions, that would be great to know.
One of the things we're trying to do is get an electronic copy of the flyer that was handed out, that we've been handing out. It's the one that I was given, that I was told PTU was taken around through the neighborhoods. I was handing it out at churches. Someone put a link to the to one of the pages in the toolkit. That's all. That's very helpful, but it's not this. It's not the flyer. Let me get the flyer over here.
B, do you know what they're referring to?
Is it a really simple one that has like a kind of watermark graphic in the background of the hand?
Well, looks like Bert is going to pull it out.
Okay. Okay, yes, yeah, I can grab that one. One moment.
Okay. Other questions?
Hi, I have a question. My name is Shayla. Hi, thank you first off so much for everybody involved, everything that you're doing, making this happen, making it into fruition. It's absolutely amazing. And I have the utmost respect for everyone involved. So first off, thank you so much. My question is, I live in a residential unit that is, built in the 90s. It is, under the umbrella that it should be rolling back the rent. There's about 40 units within this building. They recently sent out a flyer to everybody harassing the tenants to force them to pay more than what they're legally allowed to, or threatening them with evictions, 3-day notices. So what my question is I don't doubt that this building is going to do everything they can to push their tenants to force them to pay, the illegal amount. Is it better at this point for the tenants to band together and almost create somewhat of a class action lawsuit in small claims court before they start handing out 3-day notices?
I'm just trying to figure out from what you said whether they are covered by Measure H or not covered by Measure H. Do you know?
Everyone in this building, there's about 40 units, they're all covered by Article 18.
Okay, so I would say banding together is always good. And getting together with the folks at PTU to talk about specific strategies would be helpful. And even if you can't come to a meeting, the likelihood is that the team might well visit your 40 unit complex in order to figure out what the best strategy would be.
Okay, because I'm just concerned, as of March, there's quite a few tenants here that are being strong-armed into signing a lease that's above the increased amount. And I wrote in the chat the article in the section that says that is illegal, and they're legally allowed to not have to sign a new lease. Same with the rent increases. If there's been served a 30-day notice and the rent increase is above what is allowable, that then makes it null and void. So my building is dealing with a lot of that with all of these tenants. And what they're trying to do is scare tactic us, of course, but if they send out 3-day notices to pay or quit, at that point, we're going to end up in court anyways. So what I'm wondering is it better if, you know, we kind of all band together, go do a class action lawsuit against this building before they start trying to pick out tenants with 3-day notices?
Can I jump in real quick?
Sure. 'Cause
Um,
I'm thinking the Eviction Defense Law Center might well be an option also.
Yeah, so I will say up front that I have basically no experience in taking the affirmative actions in court, like suing the landlord. Number one, though, banding together for whatever purpose, yes, highly encouraged, especially for legal purposes. You can also do that on the defense. So you could, if you were to end up, you all got the eviction notices, you could request we would always want to, you want a jury trial. And if you end up in that situation, and be like, it is best if you can get the trial to be your landlord versus the tenants of all the units, and not your landlord versus each tenant individually, you know, one case. I want to say, yes. But I think the most important thing is right now to start your tenant association. Start talking to your neighbors, get them together and say, we all agree, we're now part of the, you know, 50 Oak Knoll Tenant Association or whatever you want. And there's stuff that we can do outside of the legal system that can get your tenant that might get your landlord to back off. Like, a lot of times we're successful without suing a landlord. But if you guys want to get together and do that, sounds cool to me. I'm not a lawyer, so I don't know how exactly that's going to go. What I can do is you know, share my knowledge and try to help you guys organize together. But it is super important that you meet together as a group, form some documentation that you have, because under Measure H, it says in there very explicitly that a protected activity is organizing or forming or participating in a tenants association, or talking to or interacting with anyone that is a tenant advocate. It is protected under Measure H, so you kind of have the right to organize. That's not a typical scenario. So additionally, look into the retaliation section and harassment section. Those are on the slide, and it references which parts of the code, but there is a presumption in court, a presumption of retaliation if your landlord tries to do these illegal things after you are, like, you know, asserting your rights or forming a tenants association, or telling them that no, they can't raise this, blah, 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 or you need to repair this. There's an assumption, like, if that happens within a year. So legally, the court has to go, oh, well, you asked for a repair that you didn't get, or you formed a tenant association, the landlord found out, and after that, you got 3-day notices to evict. That is assumed in court to be retaliation, which is illegal. So organizing, you know, getting established with your neighbors, you will immediately have a really solid defense against those eviction cases. I really, Shayla, were you at one of the other meetings before? Did I meet you already, or is this?
Yeah, I was there
Okay.
maybe about 3 weeks ago, I think.
Yeah, cool. Yeah, let's keep talking about that. That's one of the main goals of PTU, is to have individual buildings have their own tenant association where they do these things together. And we want to help be a part of that and help get that going. So
I appreciate that. Yeah, because I printed out the law, and you know, it's 40-something pages, and I stayed up until 4 a.m. last night just reading it. It was one of the most beautiful pieces of literature I've read in a long time. So thank
you on reading that. Yeah, nice job.
But yeah, so I am
Here's Jane and the rest of the crew.
beautiful, gorgeous. I love it. There's a lot of protection here for basically what the landlord is trying to do right now to the tenants of this building. I was just highlighting so much of this, and my plan was to give it to the manager of this building, who's not, she's kind of, one step below the actual company itself. That the JK Residential is the main, and then there's her. And I think she doesn't know what's happening. And so she's trying to almost work with the tenants, but she's also being strong-armed by the company that she works for. So I'm just trying to get as many people. So far, I think we have 3 other tenants within this building that are, we're all in communication in a group chat. But that's what I'll do. I'll go ahead and go forward and just try to get as many of the residents here to, create a small union. And then if we start getting the 3-day notices, which I'm really thinking is going to happen, I'll go forward with that. And I would love to keep in communication with UB so that, we can make this happen.
Yeah.
So people aren't losing their homes.
Yes,
And
that
I do
is
think-
phenomenal. Yeah.
I do think that you need to know how many people are really wanting to take strong action against the landlord versus those who are being more timid. Because you need to come up with a strategy that's going to address everybody's needs. And that I will tell you that Elena Pop, if she decides to take on this bit of litigation, she would be quite effective as a tenant representative. But again, whatever happens, people need to be banding together. They need to be in touch with PTU. And if they decide to sue, then that's but another thing to do. But you may also want to look to the newspapers and other kinds of things that will highlight what's going on and why this is the problem.
So I'm thinking it would be important, Bridget, or, Bea and Michelle, to put your contact in chat for people so they can reach you. So
Yeah, we'll do that. Yeah.
I can see we could probably go on with lots of questions, but we do want to move on here. Bert, are you ready to?
Sure. Do you want to do your report first, or do you want me to do the team
Why
reports?
don't you go ahead and talk about the broader work that we're doing?
Okay.
We have strongly supported rent control for years and years, and we're grateful for those that took the lead in this, but we want to make sure you're aware of some of the other things that we're involved in as well. So
Yeah, so I'm going to share a PowerPoint here. This is tenant organizing is hugely important. We've been, very involved in it, very supportive of it, and played a supporting role. We're very grateful for what the Pasadena Tenants Union has done. And we want to share a little bit about the other work that we do here. So I'm going to share my screen here from the beginning. Okay, so this is PowerPoint I called it's the team reports, or what's happening at MHCH. So Making Housing and Community Happen has a very small staff. There's only 4 paid staff right now. 2 of us are half-time and 2 are just 4 hours per week. And then Jill and Anthony are full-time volunteers. They work more than anybody. But we do have a lot of other volunteers who write letters and testify at city council meetings. And then we have volunteers that are on our 4 teams. So this is a view of our work through the 4 teams. First, we have our safe parking team. So there are about 15,000 people who live in their vehicles in Los Angeles County. But until recently, there was no safe parking program in the San Gabriel Valley. But on April 1st, 2021, we helped start the first safe parking program in the San Gabriel Valley. We did this with Trinity Lutheran Church. It's here in Pasadena. Trinity Lutheran Church here in Pasadena, and Foothill Unity Center. The church provided the facilities, and Foothill Unity Center oversees the program, provides case management. So we have 5 safe places to park, access to a bathroom in the church building, case management, vehicle repair assistance. We've done some of that, mental health treatment, and referrals to things like job placement or permanent housing. And so we've had 4 people permanently housed through this program. We've also submitted 2 grants recently for expansion to other San Gabriel Valley sites. Got a few new parkers this month and a new team member. And there are potlucks, community potlucks every month. And so it's really become a little community of its own. Some of the goals are to get funding for things such as showers. The church has some showers, but they're not, they need to be worked on. We need to make it legal because this is not actually legal in Pasadena. The church was willing to do it under the radar, and so is Foothill Unity Center. But we want to make it legal, and we want to expand this year our goal to 1 more San Gabriel Valley site. If you want to volunteer with this committee, contact Wendy McGrail. That's Wendy, BMCGRAIL @gmail.com. If you want to refer someone who's living in their vehicle, contact Myra Bueno. Myra is MAIRA @foothillunitycenter.org, or you can call her at 626-358-3486. That's if you want to refer someone who's living in their vehicle. Next, we have the Congregational Land Committee, and this is one that consults with congregations to have affordable housing built on their land. So this team is grant funded to do feasibility studies with congregations, to write a request for proposal to interview developers, and to actually interview the developers. They can do all this, what's called pre-development work that usually nobody does, or nobody helps churches or these kinds of institutions with. So they're grant funded to do this. They're in discussions with 60 congregations across Southern California. They've completed 2 educational cohorts. These are cohorts for congregations that need to learn what they need to know to have affordable housing on their land. They have 2 more cohorts scheduled for the fall and the spring. So if you are part of a congregation that wants to have affordable housing built on their land, contact us because you need to be part of one of those cohorts. They completed the process with a congregation in Laguna Beach. That's the first one they've completed, where they're going to build affordable housing. And that's going to be, my understanding, the first affordable housing built in Laguna Beach in many years. Some of the goals are they want to complete the process with some more congregations and get 500 units planned on religious properties in the next year. They also want to replicate themselves. So this team is talking with people outside of Southern California to form teams in other parts of the country. They're talking with people in Washington State, Denver, Texas, and Northern California. Now, one of the things we run into is a lot of churches, a lot of religious congregational sites are not zoned right for affordable housing. They're either not zoned at a high enough density, or they're not zoned residential at all. And if you try to go site by site, it adds years to the process and adds hundreds of thousands of dollars to the cost. So we're trying to do religious overlay zones. That's a change zoning across a whole jurisdiction. Seattle did it very successfully. The Black churches in Seattle led the way on that, the Nehemiah Initiative. You can go to Seattle, to their website, and they have a really, really great City of Seattle. They have a really great video on it. The first city to do it in California was Sierra Madre, of all places. They have about 4 church sites. The overlay zone got 2 of them over the line to be able to build affordable housing. So now they just have to decide whether they want to do it. We got a religious overlay zone in Pasadena. It wasn't that extensive. There were already 6 churches in Pasadena that were zoned appropriately. The zoning amendment got about 4 more of them over the line. But we've also gotten it into the housing elements of another number of other Southern California cities. And we're also working on a state level religious overlay zone. It's called SB4, Senate Bill 4. This is the 3rd year. We've been trying it this year. We finally have the support of a lot of several labor unions, so we think we'll get it done. Our next support team that got approval of 69 units at what's going to be Heritage Square South. That's at the corner of Orange Grove and Fair Oaks. If you go there now, you can see it being built. We got approval of this several years ago. It's finally being built and going to be finished by the end of the year. 69 units of permanent supportive housing for seniors who are experiencing homelessness. Seniors are the largest growing part of our homeless population. Right after that, we did a big campaign and got 106 units of senior housing, low-income senior housing, approved right in our Civic Center, right by City Hall. And 10% of this will be for seniors who've been experiencing homelessness. Then the housing, so this team has also worked on the housing element in a coalition with other groups in the city. The housing element is a plan that every city in California has to have to show that they are planning. It's planned for 8 years. They have to show that they have a viable plan to facilitate the building of housing for everyone at all income levels. Well, cities usually don't take this very seriously, including Pasadena. So we have teamed up with some other groups in the city and try to hold Pasadena's feet to the fire. Pasadena keeps submitting housing elements that really aren't realistic. And so we keep asking the state to reject them. So far, the state has rejected 3 draft housing elements that Pasadena has submitted so far in this cycle. And they just submitted another one. We still don't think it's realistic. So we just signed on to another letter to have that rejected. We really need a housing element that is realistic. This team has also worked on the Pasadena Religious Overlay Zone and rent control and hybrid meetings. This is something we recently won just recently, a couple of weeks ago. The city was having its city council meetings and other meetings only by Zoom during the pandemic. But then slowly staff and council members were able to be in person or by Zoom. So it was really hybrid, but they only allowed the public to participate by Zoom. Then when that ended, they only were going to allow the public, and in fact, that's what they've been doing this year, is only allowing the public to participate in person. So we said, why can't the public participate both ways, by Zoom or in person? That way you increase public participation. So it looked like they weren't going to do it, but somehow we turned them around. They now not only are city council meetings hybrid, but every city council committee meeting is hybrid, as are the Police Oversight Commission, the Planning Commission, and the Design Commission. All of those are now hybrid. So we have increased democracy here in the city. Some of the goals for this committee are to work on, get the SB4 passed, to revisit the overlay zone for Pasadena, but not just for churches or religious institutions, but for all nonprofits. To get 2-story ADUs permitted. ADU is an accessory dwelling unit. Right now, they're effectively not permitted. We need that. We want them to be permitted. We want to get safe parking as a permitted use. Our safe parking program is still not technically legal. We want to keep working on tenants' rights under Measure H. And to that effect, we've had recent meetings just this last month with Justin Jones and the new city manager, Marquez. Then the North and Fair Oaks Empowerment Team, that's our next team. This is a group of churches on North Fair Oaks that want to beautify and not gentrify that part of the city. They want to do it with signage, more trees, sidewalk repairs, and affordable housing, and a complete streets redesign. That's making the streets accessible to bikers, pedestrians, to make it more of a complete street for everybody. They are exploring a visioning process for this historic African-American corridor to revive what was once a thriving community that has been disenfranchised due to exclusionary policies. Some of their goals this year are to write 5 grants through the city for complete streets, create a specific plan for Fair Oaks north of Washington Boulevard, and get more youth involvement. We also have a congregational network of more than 20 congregations that participate in MHCH. And if you want your congregation to be part of that, contact me. That's my information right there, bert@makinghousinghappen.org, or 626-993-7958, 626-993-7958. And also want to tell you real quickly, we are starting a 6-month series of MHCH 101 to get for people who want to really get involved with us. Our first session is March 7th at 7 p.m. It's going to be at Jill and Anthony's house, and I'm going to be leading it. Send us an email, put it in the chat or whatever if you want to be part of that, and we can get you more information. So that is the team reports. And 30 of you hung in there with us. So thank you very much for staying through the team reports. I'm going to hand it back over to Jill. She's going to give the ED report. And there might be some announcements. I don't know, but Jill, take it away.
Yeah, thanks. I want to acknowledge that it's a little after the time that we had told you all that it would end at 8:30. So can I get 5 minutes from you and we'll end in 5 minutes? Okay, thanks. It's nice to see you, Amadi, and others that I haven't seen for a while. So what I'd like to say is just a little bit about my habits of reading the newspaper every day. It's almost every day that there's articles about either rent increases or how the housing crisis or any number of new ideas on how to address all of this. So one article that I read was about housing grades, and maybe you saw that one. Cities were given A, B, C, D, and even F based on what Bert just mentioned, the housing element and how cities are doing and what are their grades in terms of being able to produce the housing needed at those various income levels. So we're grateful that we have the opportunity to weigh in and try to move our city toward an A, but we aren't there yet. Another article I read was about Huntington Beach and how they are doing everything they can to not meet their housing element requirements. And so they're even suing the state. But as a result of them not meeting their goals, their city and many others are under what's called the builder's remedy. And so essentially cities are taking their right to have their own zoning away. They no longer have control of their zoning, and people can build pretty much what they want at this point. And so a lot of people are afraid to actually do that. But even our city here in Pasadena, that is the case. There's another article that I read about our unhoused neighbors, and that actually 5 a day in LA County are dying on our streets. That is so unacceptable in our society. Another Reddit article was about the feared SB 9. So this policy allows homeowners to split their lots in two, and each house on each lot can then have an ADU, the accessory dwelling unit. Everyone was afraid of this. Cities were saying, no, don't let that happen in our city. So far, only 53 people statewide have taken advantage of it. So really, that's just a dismal statistic. It begs for bigger and better and bolder solutions. So there's been other articles about that, about some of the bold solutions we really need. Just yesterday in the Pasadena Now, there was a wonderful article called The Grand Solutions by Rick Cole, who's been involved in our committee. He's been the mayor of our city and also worked in Santa Monica, and Azusi's an amazing man. And so I'm going to put this article in chat, but I'm just going to read briefly one little bit of what he said. This article, he said, if hundreds of middle-class Pasadena residents were suddenly deprived of their homes by earthquake, fire, or flood, and the government left them homeless for 3 years, the entire city would be summarily recalled. City council would be recalled. Yet we tolerate the ongoing presence of people pushing shopping carts with everything they own and huddling under blankets in the doorway of a business seeking refuge from the cold and rain. I think that really puts it into perspective for us. So I just want to reiterate to join our effort. Bert mentioned the ASHA committee, Affordable Supportive Housing Advocates. We're doing all kinds of work around policies and projects to end homelessness. You may want to join our Safe Parking Committee to help extend to more sites. The only safe parking program in all of San Gabriel Valley is the one that we have, and we're close to getting it legalized. One of the goals of the early church was really interesting. One of their goals was to end poverty, and they actually accomplished it. In Acts 4, it says that they ended all poverty among them. And that's because they were willing to share. They shared all that they had in common. And so Anthony and I have been trying our best to take that seriously. We share our property with a friend who was on the streets for years. Now, this helps one person, but there may be others that want to do this in their own home. If we have homeowners here on the call. But we need this and much more bold and grand solutions that are faith-filled with imagination and a commitment that it will do whatever it takes to end homelessness in our city. So some of the ways to do that, you'll be able to learn about in the next Housing Justice Forum that we have coming up on the 28th of next month of March. And so I'm putting in the chat how you can sign up for that. Let me make sure that
I
everyone.
put them in the chat. I put
You did
that on.
already?
Yep.
Okay, great, thanks. And then there's also, I'm going to do a little share and just show you the what the flyer looks like. I thought I had it up. Anyway, you have the link to the chat, and I hope that you can. We'll send to you this flyer as well as the recording of tonight, so that you can share that with your friends. And I just really want to thank you. Thank you so much for joining us. And I also want to put that article by Rick Cole in the chat for you.
I
So you
think it
can-
is.
Did that get in there as well?
I think so.
Okay, great, fabulous. Well,
And
people
on
are,
the 28th, Jill, maybe we'll have some good news about rent control.
wouldn't
That's when the hearing
that
is.
be great. Yes, I'm going to stop this share if I can figure out.
So we're back on recording. So Ryden has been waiting very patiently. I saw him